My name is Zoe Hope, and I'm one of those people that's been on YouTube a long time but not making videos, just kind of being the watcher and the appreciator. But as a student in a public school in America, one of the things that a lot of juniors are subjected to, or pretty much anybody taking AP literature, is the Scarlet Letter, woo, by Nathaniel Hawthorne. So many people think that the Scarlet Letter is just this book of torture and hatred, and Nathaniel Hawthorne must have hated all of humanity to subject us to his reading. Honestly, I really like the Scarlet Letter, and I thought that if I kind of shared with you what I liked about it, then maybe you might like it too. Or at least you'll not hate it. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll have, if nothing else, a better understanding of the Scarlet Letter, and hey, maybe you'll do better on some tests that you might have. Yeah. Just like SparkNotes says, if you read far enough, these type of videos, this type of stuff, SparkNotes, me, whatever, it's great for help, but it never takes the place of actually reading the book. I guarantee that if you actually read the Scarlet Letter, even if you don't understand it, you'll do better. My focus throughout this will be analyzing the character of Reverend Dimmesdale. He's a very important character in the novel, if you don't already know. Spoiler alert, he's the father of the child that Hester has. But you know what, if you don't know that, then you really should. Okay, so Chapter 1 is titled The Prison Door. Cool thing about Nathaniel Hawthorne, one of the only authors that you'll actually read in school that names their chapters. I think that's pretty cool. So what happens is, in this Puritan colony, when someone does something wrong, pretty much they go to prison. And in this book, it's described as this prison which has been there as long as the settlement. We could get into a lot of the imagery about that, but if you read it, you're just kind of hit with this American romantic idea of something that nature doesn't want to happen. It's something that is definitely man-made, this human prison, which also correlates with the Puritan ideal of the original sin, that whenever someone is born, they're already bad people or good people. It's all predestined. So, first chapter, the prison exists, and there's a rose bush next to it. Now, we can tie this to American romantic idealism with the idea of nature and its beauty and its persistence throughout man's stupidness, but really the importance is the tie that the rose bush has to Hester, which will come later in the book. Chapter 2 is really when stuff starts to happen, and I use that term loosely because pretty much 4 things happen in this whole novel. You are kind of transported into the scene of a bunch of people waiting for something to happen. You see them waiting outside the prison door. These women are bickering, and most of them are talking about this woman who's in trouble, and she has committed adultery. These women were angry because Hester Prynne, the main protagonist of the novel, she got in trouble, but instead of being killed or excommunicated like Anne Hutchinson, you'll learn about her in American history, she has this letter put on her chest, like right in this area, and it's this Scarlet Letter, and the letter is an A, and the A stands for adultery. If you don't know what adultery is when you have sex out of marriage, and it's usually because you are married. So yeah. So these women are saying, look, her punishment isn't harsh enough. I mean, if she has something on her shirt, can't she just cover it up? And most everybody agrees, except for this one woman that quite simply says, well, even if she covers it up, it will burn in her heart. And to a certain extent, that's true. And you'll see that later in the novel. People are standing outside the prison doors, and they're waiting for Hester to come out, and they're just kind of excited because nothing really important, well, let me rephrase that. They're really excited because nothing really exciting ever really happens in a Puritan community. I mean, they're Puritans, for crying out loud. So, finally, Hester comes out, and it describes it as she's being led out by this prison guard, and right before she's about to step into the sunlight and darkness, those are big symbols in this novel, she breaks away from him, and it's like she is stepping outside of the prison doors of her own will. Another thing about Hawthorne's book is that Hester Prynne is a very strong, very independent woman, and that was very against the time, the culture of the age, this idea of the cult of domesticity. Women were supposed to be submissive, and the husband was supposed to do all the thinking, and quite honestly, they were just supposed to sit there and be told how to live. And so symbolically, Hester stepping out of the prison doors is kind of her saying, I'm an individual, I will be seen. Which makes the women that were standing around gossiping earlier even angrier, because they're like, Hester, this is exactly what we were saying. And then the one woman's like, but it will burn in her soul. You get the picture. So after she steps outside the prison door, part of Hester's punishment is that for the first several hours of her having the Scarlet Letter, she stands in the middle of town on this big scaffold, which means like this little stage. And that's usually, have you ever seen those movies that have the big wooden things that are like, and your head goes in and your arms go in and people throw fruit at you? Yeah, well that's usually on a little stage called a scaffold. And she was supposed to stand there on the scaffold with this babe in her arms, pretty much to be stared at with her Scarlet Letter, marking the beginning of her punishment. So she makes her way to this scaffold, and all this time she is ridiculed and she's mocked, and children fear her. They see her as this symbol of, sin, which she becomes. And so she's on her way there, and of course this is humiliating to her, but she's kind of blanking it all out. She's holding her baby, and she's just moving on. So she stands on the scaffold for these several hours, and she's just thinking. And the reason she gets through it so easily is that, well, not easily, the part of what helps her endure this punishment is her just kind of getting lost in her thoughts of her past. She thinks about her childhood and about her family, and she thinks about her husband. Now, this is important. She got married, and it was not for love. She married this kind of old dude who had been waiting to get married because he wanted an education. So this guy was super smart, but actually really ugly. He had this thing with his shoulder where one shoulder was raised above the other, and he was like the Hunchback of Notre Dame with a beard. So she married this guy, and it obviously wasn't for love. It was for money, it was for social gain, it was probably for a ticket to the New World. I mean, let's be serious, who wouldn't want to live in America? She gets to America after marrying this man, and she's there for 2 years. Now, she was supposed to go first to kind of get settled in, and then her husband was going to come over and they were going to live happily ever after, except not happily, because, I mean, she married this guy that's way older than him. But he doesn't show up. 2 years pass by where she's just living alone, and everybody knows that she's married. It's not just like, oh, there's that woman. They know she's married. They know that she's waiting for her husband. It comes to a point where they start noticing something about Hester. She's pregnant. Now, if I was a married woman and my husband was not in town with me and I got pregnant, unless I was the Virgin Mary, I had sex out of my marriage, which is adultery, and that's how she was put in prison. So she's thinking about that, and this is where we come to chapter 3.